Controversial opinion, but 2020 was awful. My name is Andoriana, a Twitch streamer
that you should totally follow.
And last year, I played a ton of games. Thing is, I didn't play many games that came out last year. Honestly, as good as this year has been for video games, most of the games that came out either didn't appeal to me, I can't run, looking at you Doom Eternal, or I just haven't gotten around to playing. However, I did still play a lot of games this year, especially due to the quarantine giving me tons of free time. I figure it'd be interesting to go over my favorite games I experienced for the first time this year, and hey, maybe I'll make another one of these next year. Oh, and disclaimer, the only gaming systems you'll see on this list are the Nintendo Switch and PC, as that's all I played on this year, so don't expect any Series X exclusives. Imagine you're sitting on the toilet back last April, idly browsing through Twitter, and suddenly you think to yourself, man, I should get Super Hexagon. Super Hexagon is a game made by Terry Kavanagh, who is well known for games like VVVVVV, and more recently, Dicey Dungeons. He's also a very important Flash game creator. In fact, before Super Hexagon, he made a game called Hexagon, which was a prototype version of Super Hexagon. The first thing I noticed whenever I started up Super Hexagon was that it had some incredible tunes. These come courtesy of the artist Chipsoul. If that name seems familiar, recently Chipsoul has worked on the soundtrack to Cadence of Hyrule and got to make an original music pack for the game's DLC. The next thing I noticed about Super Hexagon was just how fast-paced it was, as I was already dead and trying it again. You play as a triangle revolving around a hexagon who really enjoys existence, but have white lines that really hate that you like existence coming at you. It's a fun game to start up when you have nothing better to do, or when you just have a few minutes to play something, and I really enjoy occasionally going for high scores or attempting any of the harder levels. Speaking of, yeah, this game is hard. It took me 3 hours of grinding to even last 1 minute in the easiest difficulty. Despite this, it's still a very charming indie game, but nothing that you would want to play for a long time. Speaking of playing things for a long time, I swear I have a good reason. I've always had a soft spot for very silly games. Maybe it's because I never played any incredibly competitive games like CSGO or League, or maybe it's because I've always loved Wipeout, but regardless, I enjoy silly things. Fall Guys is incredibly on the silly side, and can be very dumb and frustrating, but I found it to be very entertaining. For a few weeks. This game is the definition of a fad game. It blew up quickly due to being free on PS Plus in August, but had died down considerably by September and had completely washed away by October. Despite this, for the short time I did play it, I found it to be very enjoyable. In fact, I have more time in it than I do in some upcoming games on this list. I really enjoyed the platforming, as instead of controlling well, it decides to control just well enough to be playable, but not enough to let you escape even the silliest things it has to offer. It also has a very interesting visual style that makes it feel like a game show set in a cartoon world, which I greatly enjoy. However, the main gripe I have, and the biggest reason why people left the game so quickly, is that as fun as it is initially, you have a limited set of levels, specifically 24 at launch and only 1 more while I was playing. By the time Mediatonic put out more levels, people, including myself, were way less interested in the game. This is a game I can't wait to look back on in 10 years and think, oh shoot, that was a thing that came out. Neat. Fun fact, the Hades people also made other games. Bastion is the first of 4 games Supergiant Games has made, and also the first of 4 in this style. The game is around 6 hours, with a story that's fairly deep, yet not too confusing. It also has in-game narration from a character talking about the protagonist's story while it's happening, which I greatly enjoyed. Props to Logan Cunningham on narration.
An old repeater falls out of the sky. Ain't a gift from the gods, but it'll have to do.
Now the game itself is a hack and slash, which is actually a genre I don't have much experience with, simply due to me never looking into it. As an intro to the genre... Wait, hold on. Wait, Google's telling me it's actually an action RPG. I suppose I got this idea it was a hack and slash, as most of the game you are tearing through waves of enemies. However, Despite starting off with a really cool hammer and getting tons of new weapons throughout the game, each having their own unique gimmicks, I still always defaulted to the sword and bow that you get early on, as they were the most fun to use and didn't really have any extra gimmick that would hamper you. This was also exactly when I realized I would love Hades, which I still have yet to play unfortunately. I would easily recommend this game to anyone who enjoyed Hades, but outside of that, if the game looks interesting to you, it's $15 on Steam, so at least check it out. Hyper Light Drifter is an interesting case, as this was the first game I ever played through blind on my Twitch channel. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to see me live, or if you want to watch my VODs in all their 480p glory. Anyway, this game is also in the fabled action RPG genre, but it's also an adventure game, unlike Bastion, which was basically a linear path the entire time. This means that Hyper Light Drifter allows you to go a bit off the beaten path to explore. However, most of the optional paths end quickly and give you health, gear bits for upgrades, keys and monuments for bonus things, and modules for game progression. I have yet to mess around with the post-game stuff, as I beat the game less than a month ago and have been trying to play other games, but if you enjoy going after that sort of thing, then I highly recommend the game. However, they are hard to find, just a preface. Anyway, the game highly reminds me of top-down Zelda games like A Link to the Past, or even Zelda 1, with less emphasis on exploration and more on combat. The combat is very fluid and fun to experience. As for the story, it tries to go for a show-not-tell approach, in that it shows you a few events through a flashback and character dialogue, which is shown, not spoken, as they speak a fictitious language. However, I didn't really feel like I understood the story whenever I finished the game, but that could also just be because I haven't done the post-game content. I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys top-down Zelda, or is a fan of simple but enjoyable combat. It's Among Us. What do I need to add? All kidding aside, I won't spend much time on this one, as you most likely already have heard of it. Simple take on games like Mafia or Werewolf, where 1 to 3 people are imposters who want to discreetly kill the others without getting caught. The other people play as crewmates, people who just want to do tasks and live a long and happy life. There are more strategies and mechanics to it, but as I said, you should already be aware of all of that. Something interesting, however, is that initially, I saw this game as another fad game like Fall Guys that people would play for about 3 weeks to a month and then forget about forever. While it definitely could still be considered a fad, it still has such an impact after it took off last summer, and a much bigger one than when it initially released in 2018. It also shows much promise for future indie games, as even though Inner Sloth is a tiny team of fewer than 10 people, they still made one of the biggest games of the year, even going as far as getting 2 Game Awards. Massive props to them for being able to pull it off, even after 2 years of failure with the game. Now this may be considered cheating, but this is my list so I don't care. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy is a compilation of the first 3 Phoenix Wright games, which were released initially on the DS, but updates the art and fixes typos in the original script. This means it doesn't do much different outside of just letting you play the original 3 games again, but if that's its primary objective, it does it well, as it's available on 3DS, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and Steam. As for the games themselves, they are so fun. It's a visual novel/puzzle game, so don't go into it expecting incredible gameplay. But also don't be discouraged from trying it just because it's a visual novel, as it's still so charming and not overly anime like other games of its style. Each character is a joy to see talk or act in the game, and is made even better when the wacky cast is put in a court of law. Speaking of, the game nails the idea of being a lawyer perfectly, making you want to save your clients while still being interesting to read. And I haven't even discussed the puzzles. The ones where you investigate for clues are kind of weak and are mostly just text, but the actual court scenes are a joy to play, as you have to present the right piece of evidence and call your opponent's bluffs to save your clients. Honestly, I didn't read many books during 2020, but the text in these games is so lengthy and enjoyable to read that I ended up doing more reading this year than I do in most years. Mad recommend to anyone who wouldn't mind a little bit of reading. While The Last of Us Part 2 may have won it at the Game Awards, Animal Crossing is essentially the game of the year. I'm not saying this for it being my favorite game to come out in 2020, although technically it is. I'm saying this as it released right at the beginning of most people's quarantine, so to pass the time, many people picked up a Switch and Animal Crossing New Horizons with it. This is easily the fastest selling Switch game of all time, and for good reason. Most people wanted a distraction away from the world once COVID-19 first hit, and that was exactly what the game promised, on top of just being a wicked addictive game. Animal Crossing New Horizons is a very happy and cozy game where all you do is build your island in your image, collect and pay off debt in a fun way, and relax with your animal neighbors. I know this is really oversimplifying it, but this really is what the game has to offer, a getaway from reality for at least a month or two. This is even illustrated in the premise of the game being that you're leaving to go to a remote island on the Nook Island Getaway package for a vacation. This is the game everyone needed for 2020, although I would still recommend it to anyone who has a Switch, even past 2020, as it is still a really enjoyable time. Now, before I tell you about my top 3 favorite games I played in 2020, here's a word from our special guest, GSpider.
Welcome, Web of Wires, to any of them watching. I made a video recently talking about my 10 favorite games from 2020. It's been a rough year, so I thought it'd be fun to share some of the best instead of some of the worst. For my short little voiceover today, I want to go over Half-Life Alyx, my favorite game of 2020. Thank you, Andrew, for bringing me on the show. Half-Life Alyx is a prequel to Half-Life 2 and a sequel to the original. You play as Alyx as she tried to find her father, taken by the compound. The only twist is that the entirety of the game is in virtual reality. Now, lots of people don't like that. Me, I feel like it makes for a greater experience. There's a lot more you can do with just a simple headset. Making the player feel at risk is a lot easier in VR because you can interact with anything you want. It makes the game so much more fun and interactive. The graphics, story, gameplay, it all adds up to the main attraction being a perfect revival of the Half-Life franchise. It's been a series about pushing storytelling and gameplay mechanics, so the fact that Valve saw a foreseeable future in VR and coming back to creating games after 13 years and making a game to redefine what VR gaming is like is shocking and exciting.
Thanks, Spider. Anyways, on to the rest of the list. And just like that, you go straight into Cave Story. Cave Story is actually a very old game, as it was released in 2004 on PC and is considered the father of indie games to some. This is due to it being one of the first truly successful indies on PC, although the genre had existed even from the beginning of commercial games. I guess you can consider them the grandfathers of indie games. Regardless, this is one of the best games I've ever played. Its story isn't the deepest thing in the world, as it can be summarized as guy bad, kill guy, but it still turns out to be very memorable and even emotional at times. This lack of story actually highlights the gameplay, which is incredibly fun. While it is a platformer, it really shines in its combat. The guns you get throughout the game are incredibly fun to use, as each is different from the last, and unlike Bastion, I actually used the different weapons throughout the game, until I got the super powerful endgame gun, but that's a given. On top of that, the game has the incredibly unique mechanic of letting you level up your guns by killing enemies, but also having you lose your level when you get hit, further punishing you for getting hit alongside losing health. Also, can I just say, this game's art and music are incredible. Both are reminiscent of 8-bit games, but refined. For a 6-hour game with multiple endings, unique challenges, and a short bonus story, which is exclusive to Cave Story Plus, I can't recommend it more. Also, in the future, I want to do a deep dive into this game, although I'm not sure when this would come out. For years, I always thought Cuphead was just a dumb YouTuber rage game, considering that's what they usually would highlight about it. But on a whim back in March of last year, I decided to try it out with a friend. Cuphead is a game that goes for a unique style of looking straight out of the 1930s Americana, with a unique visual style reminiscent of the golden age of animation, which it nails perfectly. It also features some incredible music evocative of the time. It's so good, in fact, it's what I was listening to when I wrote the script. As for the gameplay, it is incredibly difficult but satisfying, making you say, "God, this is hard," but still luring you in to try more. The rush you get when you beat any boss for the first time is one of the few experiences in life I really wish I could feel again. That and cocaine. Multiplayer in this game is also a treasure. While it does make the game easier as you can resurrect your teammate after they die, it is so fun to struggle through a boss together. It also gets really intense when only one person is alive and the boss you're facing is on its last phase. Speaking of, the bosses in this game are all incredibly unique and charming, from a surprisingly deadly flower to a menacing clown to even the devil himself. Wow! The moment I knew how much I loved this game was when I beat all the bosses on expert mode after beating the game due to how much I enjoyed it. I can't realistically recommend this game to everyone like with Cave Story, but if you like platformers slash shmups, that's a weird name, and enjoy difficult games or just the feeling of being rewarded, then definitely check this game out. Now before I get to my favorite game I played in 2020, I want to take a moment to shout out some other decent games I played first. Sprout. A neat indie game that easily takes inspiration from classic Celeste, otherwise known as the Pico 8 version of Celeste, but is very short and can be finished in 30 to 45 minutes. Great game to speedrun, I hear. City Skylines. A game that calls back to classic city builders like SimCity and improves on them by giving them an actual decent modern version of the game, unlike some games. But be warned, don't pick this game up on Switch. I played it on there, and it just doesn't feel as right as using a mouse and keyboard. Otherwise, fun time. Hollow Knight. I played through around 4 hours of this game, and I've gotta say, this is definitely not my thing. Despite this though, I still respect it, as I can tell it's a very good game with beautiful visuals and a neat soundtrack, but it's just not for me. This is a game you play after a lot of experience with the Metroidvania genre, which I don't have. Sonic Adventure 1. I actually really enjoyed Sonic Adventure 1 whenever I played it, but I couldn't justify putting it on the list, as I have only played Sonic's story. It was a great take on Sonic in 3D, as the addition of the homing attack gave Sonic the ability to go very fast while not having to worry about precisely attacking his enemies. I would probably enjoy some of the other stories that it has to offer, but I just haven't gotten around to playing them. Super Mario 3D All-Stars. This game would easily make the list, but I already kind of cheated with the Ace Attorney trilogy, and I don't feel like repeating that. All three of these games are incredible masterpieces that each deserve to be played, but I just can't justify putting it on there. Easy recommendation to any Switch owner though, as long as you get it before March 31st. And finally, Clubhouse Games, 51 Worldwide Classics. This was just fun. Didn't have any insane story, no incredible new gameplay style, not incredibly groundbreaking to gaming in general, and it uses tabletop games that already exist. But it was still something fun to play, and I still occasionally pop it in with friends and family. And that's it for honorable mentions. Now, let's get back to the best game I experienced for the first time in 2020. Wait a minute, this isn't right. I pride myself on first playing Celeste back when it released in January of 2018, not in 2020. So what gives? Do I have some elaborate excuse? Am I cheating again? Yes! In all seriousness though, I invested so much time into Celeste in 2020, and it was important enough for me this year that I feel like I can safely put it on this list. I'll explain why in a bit, but first, I should explain the game. In its most basic form, Celeste is a platformer in which you climb a mountain. The premise is simple, but Celeste is so much more than that. It develops Madeline, aka the main character's, personality, and makes you really feel for her as she goes on this climb. In fact, essentially the entire story of Celeste is about Madeline learning to deal with her personal problems through a personification of her pragmatic side. And the game does just such an incredible job of truly making both of them seem like real people. This is helped out by the fact that Maddie's character is heavily inspired by the life of the lead designer, Maddie Thorson. Something really interesting about the story is that Madeline learns to deal with being transgender, but the game never outright tells you this. In fact, it wasn't officially confirmed until late last year, leaving people who aren't even trans to still connect with the story. In fact, Celeste won a Game Award in 2018 for its impact, on top of Best Indie. As for the gameplay, it is some of the best fun I have ever experienced in any platformer. You have a jump, a climb, and a dash, which all feel perfect in execution. On top of that, the levels are made perfectly to account for the dash. How could I forget about the art and music? This is some of the highest quality of art I've ever seen in an indie game, and the soundtrack composed by Lena Raine, who's gone on to make music for Minecraft Nether Update and Sackboy A Big Adventure, is superb. Now, as to why this game is on my list in 2020, if I played it in 2018, I have one reason. Impact. Whenever I initially beat the game, I thought, alright, this is fun, but I'm good. I then put it down for about 2.5 years. I wouldn't have come back to it, but my friends got the game after I recommended it to them, which pushed me personally to replay the game. From there, I found that there was a bonus level in the game, plus another bonus level added later, named Farewell, which acts as an epilogue to the story. I decided, yeah, it'd be fun to play them, but I didn't want to get the crystal hearts to unlock them, so I used a cheat code that the game had built in. While the first bonus level wasn't that bad, it took me about 400 to 500 attempts, Farewell took me 20 hours to beat, and I ended with over 6,000 deaths. While I do regret using the cheat code, I think I should have gone through and practiced the other stuff the game had for me. I don't regret beating Farewell for a second. Celeste is just such a fun game to me that I can sit down and play the same screen for an hour straight and still feel entertained. Afterward, I figured it would be nice to actually try and beat the harder levels the game had. Once I was nearly complete with that, the official Celeste Twitter account sent out this, an event to celebrate and introduce people to speedrunning Celeste. I decided this would be an interesting thing to try, so over the course of 2 weeks, I decided to practice this and achieve a sub 1 hour run. I started off with a 2 hour 11 minute run, then I got a 1 hour 41 minute run, and so on, until November 3rd arrived and I had a 1 hour 5 minute run. I decided the best way to finish my grind was to stream it on Twitch. Unfortunately, my VOD for this wasn't saved, but the stream inspired me to continue streaming afterwards. Playing Celeste this year led me to literally start streaming on Twitch, and is basically what I've been keeping myself occupied with for the past 2 months. And don't even get me started on how I've met friends over this game, but I've talked enough about this game for one video. It's odd, I know, but I hope you understand why I put Celeste on this list. Thanks for watching to the end of my video. I really appreciate it. I'm unsure how much I'll upload in the future, but if you subscribe, you'll be alerted once another video does come, whether it's in March or when Pikmin 4 comes out. Oh, and once again, special shout out to Spider for his part in the video. I really appreciate it.